In the past episode, we talked a little bit about Arvin Vohra. He is the National Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party of Indiana, and he made some comments on Facebook that were pretty inflammatory. In one, he tried to... How do I put this? He basically said you wouldn't pander to rapists to join the party, so why would you pander to teachers and soldiers? And then on Veterans Day, the day before Veterans Day, actually, to be clear, made a point of saying thanks for trying, not thanks for your service, but thanks for trying. And the Veterans Day, Memorial Day in some libertarian circles are an opportunity to just mock soldiers and poke fun at them. And there are a lot of people in the Libertarian Party that are working hard, and those comments don't help. So Vohra's comments have actually become somewhat, it's a commonplace thing. There's a common thread there. He would be, in the party parlance, considered a radical, part of the LP Radical Caucus. There is another pragmatic caucus, of which I would say that our two next guests are part of. There's the new Mises Caucus. There's a lot of different caucuses forming within the party to start to wrestle with what is the future of the Libertarian Party. Now, if you want to hear more comments and commentary on all of that, then you can go back and listen to the last episode. But I do think that it is important to note something that happened over the weekend that I was a part of. I, in full disclosure, serve on the State Central Committee of the Libertarian Party of Indiana, which is basically the governing board. I represent the Indianapolis area. I announced at that meeting that this will be my last term serving on that board because I need to spend more time doing this, and I really, even though we're called We Are Libertarians, I really want this to be a nonpartisan venture. I don't want to influence you one way or the other. I think there are a lot of people who feel that the Republican Party or the Democratic Party even, or the Libertarian Party are valuable in terms of their efforts, and then there are other people who just don't vote, and then there are a lot of people who just don't know. And so I really want to not influence people by being a part of it, and I just don't think it's fair to the party to be a person who is in an executive position while promoting or promoting other parties and candidates and ideas, or criticizing the party that they serve. So I'm stepping down early next year and fulfilling my term there, but I will not serve again. But I did vote and speak in favor of the resolution that was passed on November 11th, 2017. And resolutions are passed by state parties, and these central committees are made up of 4 executive officers, and then sometimes some at-large officers or special officers, like we have a tech officer, and then district reps. So it's set up kind of like an executive branch and a legislative branch. And then that's how the national committee is set up, as well as a lot of the state parties. The state parties are separate committees affiliated with the National Libertarian Party, but they actually have no bearing over the national party. So this was just basically a statement by the Libertarian Party of Indiana. It has no actual bearing, but it is very rare for a state party like Indiana, that's more of a pragmatic state, to put out a resolution calling for the resignation of an officer. That typically happens in more radical states, smaller states, so it is something of note. And that's why I wanted to bring it up here. I want to read it to you before we go to our interview with Jeremiah Morrell, who is the boss hog of Liberty, which you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or at wearelibertarians.com, and the state chair, Tim Maguire. Let it be resolved. The Libertarian Party of Indiana condemns the actions of National Vice Chairman Arvin Vohra. His continued use of social media in a way that alienates voters is unacceptable. We believe that we exist as a political party to win elections and to unite around smaller government and personal freedom. The LPIN has a record of winning elections at a local level. This continued messaging from a national leader is extraordinarily damaging to our opportunities for success in local races. A leader in Mr. Vohra's position should not use their platform to be a lightning rod that drives away interested voters and candidates. The LPIN calls for the immediate resignation of Mr. Vohra and his position in party leadership. It passed unanimously, and unanimously is probably 10, 12 people. So 10, 12 libertarians agreeing on anything is pretty hard. Let's see. I want to do due diligence and read Arvin's reply, essentially. So if you'll forgive me for a moment, I'm just looking that up. Because I do want people to understand his point of view. All right, so this is what Arvin replied with. The Libertarian Party should be censured. By running candidates as quote-unquote libertarian rather as quote-unquote Republican or quote-unquote Democrat, it is making it harder for them to get elected. This is a bad strategy, plain and simple. Oh, I'm missing the point? Is the whole point that we are fighting against the state instead of for it? Is the whole point that we're opposing the status quo rather than being a part of it? Is it that we're trying to fight this two-head monster rather than becoming the third head of the monster? Obviously, worshiping the military and government school teachers will make us more popular with those in the military who still believe the propaganda and government school teachers who still believe the propaganda. But that defeats the purpose. Ending military interventionism and government schools are among the highest priorities for the freedom movement. Those two government boondoggles do more damage than the rest combined. They certainly do much more damage than every local government program combined. Fighting government schools and military idiocy isn't unstrategic, quote-unquote. It's the whole point of our movement. Getting elected by worshiping military overreach and government schools is just scoring a goal for the other team. It is generally easier to score a goal for the other team in any sport, but it is also pretty counterproductive. There are many who want to keep the Libertarian Party focused on minor issues so that we can become a minor league training ground for the Republican Party. Many of those people act as if the Libertarian Party and Republican Party are interchangeable. They are not. The Republican Party is a big government party. It favors the military welfare complex and the continuation of government schools. The Libertarian Party is a government-cutting organization. We want to dramatically cut military spending, shut down foreign bases, fire most current personnel, stop meddling in other countries' civil wars, and cut taxes accordingly. We want to end all government schools, charter schools, vouchers, theft-funded education. We are not a feeder for the GOP or a part of the GOP or anything other than adversaries with the GOP. Personal note, editor's note, I don't disagree with any of that. So I don't know that many people listening would. It's like if you just said it that way. And just in case anyone is unclear where I, Arvin, stand, I want to cut military spending and personnel to the minimum needed for defense of America, which actually may be zero, but is definitely way less than current. I want to end all theft-funded education immediately. I deeply hope that the Republican Party collapses today and will continue to work towards the end. Ditto the Democrats. I do not support joining today's military, using or working at a government school, or voting or working for the Republican Party. Respectfully, Arvin, Libertarian nominee for U.S. Senate, Maryland. Okay, I didn't know he was running for Senate. So that is his point of view, and I want to give the guys from Indiana some time now to present why they took an unprecedented step in the state party of Indiana and called for the resignation of the National Libertarian Vice Chair, Arvin Vohra. So here is Jeremiah Morrell, the boss hog of liberty, and Tim Maguire, the chair of the Libertarian Party of Indiana. On the line with us is both the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Indiana, Tim Maguire, and also the boss hog of liberty, who is the 6th district rep to the state central committee for the Libertarian Party of Indiana, is Jeremiah Morrell. We'll start with Jeremiah. You actually introduced the resolution, that's what they're called, to ask for Arvin's resignation. Why did you propose this to the state central committee?
In the last few weeks, Mr. Vohra has been damaging our reputation at the local level. we have a record of winning elections and having successful candidates in Indiana, and particularly in my area where I represent in the 6th Congressional District in East Central Indiana. And we needed to have something that we could point to for our local volunteers and candidates and officers to say, hey, the comments that are being made at the national level don't represent what we're doing at the local level. And that was the plea that I had, and it was well received by the State Central Committee over the weekend. That while we may agree with some of the sentiments, the messaging was just completely unacceptable from our vice chairman.
So, Tim, you've been involved almost as long as I have, going back to 2009, almost 10 years, and you've been, I don't know if you've been on the Central Committee, but you've certainly been a leader in the party at the local level. I can't remember a time when the LPIN ever passed any kind of resolution like this. I mean, I know that a lot of radical states a lot of times will, put up some sort of resolution. So it's very odd and out of character for the Libertarian Party of Indiana, which is normally one of the more pragmatic states, to do one of these resolutions. What does that say about the conduct of Arvin?
Oh, I think it's speaks to a great deal about how seriously we've taken this. As you've kind of just said, we've always just minded our own business here in Indiana. We've focused on positive messaging and trying to win elections. And there's times where, working with this national party has served us, and other times we just kind of go our own direction, and we try not to focus on things that are too negative. And fortunately, people like Jeremiah took some leadership and was keeping track of what was being said by our national vice chairman, and took the initiative to bring this forward. And I think it speaks volumes that not only that somebody as nice of a guy as Jeremiah is brought this forward, but it was also a unanimous decision by the entire State Central Committee of the Libertarian Party of Indiana. It's very rare, Chris, as you know, for that body to ever be unanimous on hardly anything. I think the fact that we've been pushed too far, I think, speaks a great deal.
I know that was the astounding part, that it was unanimous, because there are almost no unanimous. I mean, other than little piddly things on something like this where the party is really going to put itself out there, there's almost never unanimous votes on stuff, Tim.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I mean, and as pragmatic as most of us are, I mean, we have, radical people in the party. We've been fortunate that our radical caucus still wants to win elections. And we have libertarians of all stripes and all opinions. And the State Central Committee is definitely representative of that. And, for the fact that even a few members who probably are almost anarchists on the State Central Committee still think that these comments were out of line, just shows you how damaging this was to anyone who wants to win elections and not just score points on Facebook.
So can you explain the radical versus pragmatic thing, Tim? Sure.
So, there's different people that fall in the different spectrums as far as, libertarianism. There are some that are, very, very radical. They're more of a destinationist, libertarian. They want to see the radical agenda adopted immediately, and that's what they're going to push for every single time. Then there's others who are a little bit more pragmatic, what we would call a directionalist libertarian, saying, let's start moving the needle towards liberty, and we can compromise a little. We never compromise towards less liberty, but we can always compromise towards more liberty and just start moving the needle a little bit further. And so those libertarians are not necessarily going to take the strong stances when they're talking to the voters, but we're still trying to make a libertarian society. The fact that even the strong stance, we need to promote the radical, absolute, perfect libertarian utopia to the voters. Even those members still saw Mr. Vohra's comments as unacceptable.
Jeremiah, what were some of the comments that you heard that led you to introduce this? Because it can be controversial, so I imagine that there were a lot of people in your area that were saying things for you to introduce this, because Tim's right, you're not the type of person who, like, if you've pissed Jeremiah off, Jeremiah within the We Are Libertarians world is always the cooler. He's the Senate. He's the one that is calming everyone down. So what were you hearing from just regular members in your area?
I've heard from a number of people that they just, this is a very, very sensitive time as you're working at the local level. We're looking at an election that's 12 months away, so this is the time where we have to be recruiting candidates and we have to be recruiting volunteers for the next cycle. And in the last 2 weeks, I've heard from a number of people that we have in the pipeline to be volunteers or to be candidates that all of a sudden they're not sure that they want to move forward with the party because these are the views that are being pushed. And we're not talking about people that are going to run for federal office or even a large statewide office. I'm talking about the people that are going to be running for my state representative seats, my county level seats, my municipal government seats in 2019. And I can't lose those people because we've got somebody that's trying to use their platform as as something other than a winning message. And unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen somebody. Whenever you compare teachers and military personnel to rapists in a statement, I don't care how you're doing it or how eloquent you think you are, those two statements get tied together, and then it becomes the responsibility of the local candidates to answer for that, and that's unacceptable. And then over Veterans Day or the Veterans Day weekend, we had another similar statement telling military recruits, "Well, you tried," and it's just unacceptable. On no planet is that messaging that's going to win an election. So, like I said before, this is something that we had to do to be able to point our local candidates to something, to say, these views don't represent us, and that's not what we're about. We want to promote personal freedoms and lower taxes and more liberty, and I think we can achieve that in our 2018 and 2019 elections. But we're not going to do that if we're driving people away before they're even open to listening to our message.
Yeah, and just to give one clarification, so we're fair to Arvin, he didn't compare soldiers and teachers to rapists, but he used an allegory trying to use rape, and then in the next line said, "Don't pander to the soldiers." I mean, it was very inelegant, and it certainly, I don't think his intent was to say that obviously teachers and soldiers are rapists, but I think for the average listener, in my opinion, that's sort of what the message was. And I can tell you, our Thursday night episode is going to be with two people who served in the military who were so pissed off about this that they wanted to come on and actually explain what it's like to be a soldier, because they just didn't feel like Arvin represents them. And one of them is a guy named Doug Carr, Tim. And Doug is a guy that we've been trying to, probably the top digital marketer in the city, also very well known in terms of tech circles across the nation. Somebody that I consider a big fish that I've been trying to woo for years into the Libertarian Party. And it's these kind of comments just really don't help us recruit donors, influencers, future candidates. It's just really tough. And from my perspective, I am on the state central committee. I did vote for it. I did speak in favor of it, and it's not the philosophical aspect of it that I necessarily disagree with. It is that it stops the conversations with people like Doug that he just doesn't want to hear anymore from the LP because they're quote unquote crazy. I mean, you know Doug, and you know a lot of these type of people, and we just have a higher bar, don't we, Tim?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, something that I was thinking about was that Arvin needs to go back and read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. His comments show a fundamental misunderstanding of the idea that we can disagree with what the federal government is doing, and we can disagree with what the policies of the Pentagon, and still not hate the people who are working in that industry. I mean, I think I think libertarians should be celebrating people who want to serve their country and put themselves in harm's way. It's actually quite a positive libertarian message that that somebody who wants to protect the weak should be celebrated. And that can still be true while we disagree with the policies that their bosses are making. It's just unfortunate that someone that we've put into a position of power and trust with our national party doesn't understand that how to reach voters and identify and empathize with them in their situation.
Yeah. So how was the? Let's ask Jer this. Jeremiah, have you heard from your local folks how the resolution was received?
Everybody that I've heard from in my area that I represent has been wholly in favor of the resolution, and they've been thankful that we stepped up and did something about it. Like I said, I think it really did put some people at ease and made them say, yeah, these are the folks I want to go to bat with, and this is the party I want to be a part of. If we hadn't done this, I think we really would be looking at some, not growing the party, but seeing folks go away that we've been working very hard to bring along. I know you're not going to represent everybody. I know it was unanimous by the State Central Committee. I'm sure there are Libertarian Party of Indiana members that don't agree with it, but the massive majority have been thankful and eventually have been using it as a beacon that I hope they would, to say, hey, we reject this notion that we have to be divisive in our messaging. Our friend Rex Bell said very, very nicely this week that you can have some of these opinions, but you have to know how to make it work. He's always told us behind closed doors, you don't have to be an asshole to be a libertarian, and that's really the approach we have here. You can accomplish the same things using the you get more flies with honey approach, and just continuing to shoot ourselves in the foot in our messaging, it's unworkable. So I'm really thankful for the State Central Committee that we have at this time, and look forward to the 2018 cycle.
Yeah, I would say that there were some people on the Libertarian Party of Indiana thread that said, the State Central Committee doesn't speak for me. I know there was one, prominent member of the party, a past Central Committee member, who was unhappy with this. But by and large, I did see a positive response. I mean, I think the sentiment of it, Tim, and this is the last question because I know you guys both have to go, it's not necessarily about the philosophy of what he's saying. It's just about the way that he's crafting the message. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. We obviously all of us believe that our government shouldn't be involved in almost all of these foreign wars, if not all of them, and we obviously all have big disagreements with the way that the educational infrastructure is being handled in this country. But what I found interesting was everybody who the very few people who disagreed with our resolution didn't disagree with us on the point that Arvin was out of line. Actually, the few comments I heard that said that we should not be calling for his resignation still conceded that, yeah, his comments, were not great, and he hasn't been wording them greatly, which has basically been is our entire point. And I'm sorry, I know, a lot of people think freedom of speech means that you should be able to say whatever you want. When you've taken these positions of trust and responsibility, you've got to be held to a higher standard. I would challenge anyone who works in a similar position with any major corporation around the world. Try making, negative and divisive statements like that on your personal Facebook page and see what happens. I don't want Mr. Arvin prosecuted by the law for his comments, but they do have consequences, and the body can decide if they want him to continue representing us or not.
All right,